the gauntlet of games and teams that they're playing. Tonight it's the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Flyers will look to do something that they've had pretty good success doing this season, beating top teams on the road. It's Jason Martinez, Chris Therien, and Brian Smith. And where we start, Bundy, tonight is kind of where we were the other day. Same lineup, still no Sean Couturier, it looks like.
Yeah, and again, the easy answer for the coach today would be, well, we're not going to change a winning lineup. That's kind of the easy cliche to say, but it appears that he will be out of the lineup again. And the Flyers got a victory last game. I didn't necessarily love the process of how it went, but they did get the 2 points. And you could say to yourself, yeah, the captain wasn't in the lineup. You could also say, boy, they could have sure used him on draws the last 5 minutes of the game. But there's clearly, it's clearly messaging going on here from the coach. He wants to get Coots going. I think it's polarized a lot of people, I think, in terms of, Coots' side, Torts' side. I think that's good because we're talking about hockey. But at the same time, I think a lot of the people that are real hockey pundits are asking, what's the end game with this? I think that becomes kind of the lingering, ongoing question. So we'll see. Again, it'd be the same. And the Flyers' job and mission tonight is to get 2 points. That's what their goal is every night. And no matter what that lineup looks like, again, you're going to have a hard, I guess what I'm saying to you guys is no disrespect to those players, but I'm going to have a hard time selling, Nick Delorier or Lixell over a guy like Sean Couturier. So that's why I always say, what is the messaging? What's the end game here? But the end game the other night was 2 points and they got it. And that's, again, what it'll look like again tonight in the face of some adversity. I know there's probably players that are like, man, what's going on here? They'll think about it that way. I know there's media that do. There's other coaches around the league that do. It's a surprising move. But this is what this guy does, and he's done it in the past, and we'll see what happens.
I thought Gord Miller had a funny night in the mess hall, a funny line in the mess hall the other night before the game. He said, the coach's message to the team is block out all the noise that I created. But sometimes they're creating noise in another spot. Look over here. I can help some players, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's for whatever it is. Again, there's different forms of doing it, but this is something that he's gone back to. Like even Scott Hartnell the other night, he played for him, and he said, this is what this guy does. And don't try to bother figuring it out. But in his head, do I necessarily think that he knows exactly what he's doing? No, not at all. I mean, you're sitting your captain. It's kind of like putting all the quarters in one big bag and shaking them up and trying to pick the right one. But it's a gamble, and it's a calculation that he factors into every team he coaches. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if it's not always worked. I mean, he was in Vancouver for a year, right? So it just depends where that moment in time your team is when his antics pop out. Does that make sense?
It's a weird, it's a weird overall situation for me just because, I obviously John Tortorella is the head coach of the team, but this staff has always felt to me like they're more collaborative than, just about any other staff I've seen, just in terms of the way practices are run and things of that nature. And so, when I look at this, I'm thinking to myself, Torch is scratching the captain, but I have a hard time feeling like it's, not if it's his decision that he's made unilaterally. I feel like he's consulted, people around him too. But, at the same time, it's just hard to know exactly what the situation is when there's no information coming out publicly about it, but that's the way they want it right now, I guess.
Yeah, and the other side of it for someone like me who played a long time, played here, went through up and downs like any pro. But Coots has done so much here, and I think the problem for me as a former player, if I were in the locker room looking at it as a pundit from the outside, I don't like it because, and people be like, well, it has nothing to do with respect or whatever. But you're not here without the guy. You're not. It wasn't. Right. It wasn't coaching. Like, Torts, we got players back. But Sean Couturier, to me, is the single biggest reason why this team is still hanging on to third place in the Metro. His leadership, his accountability, his defensive presence, the way he takes up space, and it feels like all of that got tossed out overnight. That's what it feels like to me. Like, and someone could tell me different and say, "Well, you're wrong." That's how I feel about it. And that's how I would feel as a player. This is a guy that I've watched every game this year come back from 2 years off, right?
Yeah.
And became a leader, became a mentor, did everything you'd want to have a player do. And I really feel in a lot of ways that this is just a complete slap in the face, considering the guys playing ahead of them. And listen, is there bad blood? I don't know. I don't want to say that. But I tell you what, if you read his agent's comments the last few days, there's issues. And they've dated back prior to this benching.
Yeah, that's it. Buddy, we talk about slotting all the time. And the return of Couturier helped slotting in a big way. I mean, like slotting it like I always say, it's cute to say next man up. That's fun to say, and yeah, maybe that's good for a game. But next man up means the guy that I prefer in there is not in there. But the thing that we don't know here is we see this as kind of an overnight thing that happened and thrust upon the general knowledge of the fan base and those who cover the team. We don't know the buildup, and perhaps the only thing that I can think of is that there's a disagreement on the assessment of how the player feels he was playing and how the coach feels he was playing. That's the only thing that I can come to that I can kind of make sense of. That's the only, because it didn't happen overnight. Like it wasn't, he just woke up one day and said, boom, you're out. I think it's clear.
Hey, listen, I talked to Jonesy the other day, said before the game, just kind of give me a little bit of lay of the land before I went on with Smitty and you guys to say, what's going on? What's your take? And he said, listen, he needs to play better. It was the coach's decision, and I was kind of giving him, like, me and Jonesy are longtime friends. I kind of gave him that eye, like, give me a little bit more here.
Yeah.
But it didn't appear there was. No, I mean, again, and I know he's on the other side but I didn't get that. Like, I didn't get that understanding. And then, I'm thinking to myself, like, in another longtime NHL coach says to me, like, from the day that he became the captain, this started. If you could track it, going back to the beginning, you could track the way that he feels he's been treated. So again, I mean, it's out there. This is years ago. This wouldn't be a story because there wouldn't be anywhere to carry the news like this in the world we live in today. So it would just be over and done with. But it's not going away. It's going to continue to be discussed. And I don't know, maybe that's the whole plan. Maybe that's what it's all about. If it is, it's not how I don't play in the sandbox like that, but maybe you do. Maybe that's what Torts has to do to live in the NHL bubble that he's in. I don't know, but I know one thing. I think Torts deserved a lot more rope than this. And some people are going to say, well, you know what, buddy? Too bad you think that, but that's, nobody gets a free pass. Believe me, there's lots of guys that get free passes. Lots of guys that are still in this league that shouldn't be in this league that are still playing. And so don't say that, a guy like, there's certain guys you just don't do that to. And that's one of those guys for me. I'm not speaking for anyone else. I'm not speaking for the coach, Keith Jones or Danny Briere. What he did to Sean Couturier was wrong by my standards. That's all. I'll leave it at that. I hope when he gets back, he helps the team, and I would assume that'll be this weekend.
Yep.
And Jason, I'll put this back to you, I guess, a little bit, Bundy. I don't know if you've heard this yet, but on Hockey and Hounds, which just came out, half hour ago, I think, Torts does mention what you said, Jason, that there were some differences between how he wouldn't give names, but some differences between how some players are evaluating how they're playing and how he sees how they're playing. And, you can't help but wonder if this is stemming from that, because it's really the only thing that kind of makes any semblance of sense right now is that there was some sort of disagreement in that regard.
I got news for you. Coaches are wrong too. They are.
Yep.
They can be wrong. And just because they have an opinion doesn't mean they're right at all. It just means that's their opinion. Well, this is my opinion. Brian's got his and Jason's got his opinion. But what I'm saying right now to you guys is that there's no one really knows that. You don't.
Yeah. It was funny because when we taped that on Monday, it was obviously before we even knew the Couturier be scratched. And the one thing Torts did say was, I have to have those conversations. I had 2 conversations this morning, and sometimes I got to coach guys hard. And obviously in hindsight now we know that what he's referring to, and one of those conversations was obviously with the captain and them coming to an understanding. But let me ask you about the team that is going to be on the ice tonight, that is going to fight for 2 points that they sorely need in this playoff push. How easy is it for players to compartmentalize here and focus on the task at hand and not focus on the noise that is around a situation like this?
Yeah, and there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise because I get texts like even the last 2 days, whether not from any player, just people around it, people that are around the player. It's so, everyone wants everyone's opinion. Everyone wants to know what people's sentiment are, especially the former players. It's a polarizing thing. But as for the players in the game tonight, they won last game. And, as you say, you don't change the lineup. I mean, maybe in cases you do, but this is a case where they're going to keep the same lineup. I didn't love the way the Flyers played the other day. Toronto hit 4 posts. I didn't like the end of the game at all. They got a lucky out of the zone on the Lawton's tape that he made a great play to create. But they're going to have to be ready. What Carolina does tonight, guys, just looking at some of the notes beforehand, they're the best puck possession team in the NHL. And so that means they're going to have the puck a lot in the offensive zone. They're very, very good wall players. Hash mark to walls, man, they cycle well. They read each other well. So that'll be a task tonight. And that's an area the Flyers, to be honest with you, when they're not at their best, they don't do a good job of sealing the boards. In fact, it's probably the worst thing to do here is to allow extended cycles taking place in the zone. So that'll be what's on the front tonight for this team. And for me to battle a team like Carolina, it's getting it stopped on the boards and getting it out as efficiently as possible. If you watched the game the other night, we never talked about this, the three of us. I thought the Flyers' approach, guys, they didn't have a breakout the other night. They had a flip out.
Yeah.
And almost every single play, like you're not sitting here and a couple plays, you had pass plays, but if you watch when they were under duress at any time, that puck was flipped out into the neutral zone as deep as possible. And sometimes it didn't get out. Toronto kept the puck in. But I'm going to keep an eye on that again tonight, too. We've talked about this, Jace. I saw the Vegas Golden Knights in 2017 flip pucks out for an entire year into the neutral zone and make it to the Stanley Cup final. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? So it's all, but when you tell your D that, you're also telling them, we don't think you can make plays. So just get it the hell out of the zone as fast as you can and let our forwards have a chance at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's a trend.
Walker being gone hurt. It's hurt for sure.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think Sealer went out the next night obviously has exacerbated it a little bit, but that certainly has been a trend, not just here, but around the league this year. And that's one thing we did ask him today was, has the mentality changed a lot? Or not a lot. I wouldn't think it would have changed a lot, but, has it changed at all with the personnel changes on defense and being banged up? And, he did mention that, the strategy hasn't changed to be aggressive and before, but he did kind of acknowledge that, it's taken a little bit more. You have to be a little bit more careful with picking and choosing where you do that. And, maybe that does have a little bit of reliance on the flip now, as opposed to the way that the original 6 from this season were able to break it out.
Yeah. No, and all good points. And, again, you've got like patchwork. You got new guys in here playing. Johnson's never played here. I mean, imagine what he's thinking, right? He's coming from a team he's been on forever, a Stanley Cup champion a couple of years ago, and here he is now on a rebuild that looks like it's maybe on the train to the playoffs. So, and again, that's got to be a situation where he's got to reinvent himself too, really quick, adapt to new things. And so there's a lot that's going on. And listen, guys, we've talked also about the style points. There's no style points this time of year, right? It's all about the point or the 2 points. And the Flyers, whatever you want to say about Torts and whatever his plan is, they got 2 points the other night. And that's the bottom line at this time of year.
Going to be 2 points up for grabs once again tonight. Let's take a time out here on Flyers Game Day. Brian Smith and I will return. We'll get you the opening lineups and much more as the Flyers take on the Canes. We're back after this on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network. Smitty's like one of those quick change people. Remember that act they did in Vegas where they go, whoop,
Yeah, phone booth going on.
the hotel room to the arena. We're back live as the Philadelphia Flyers get set to take on the Carolina Hurricanes. And I guess is this the middle game, Smitty, of this the gauntlet?
Yeah, right. Three more after this, 3 before, 3 after. So yeah, the middle one, and it's despite everything else going on, even if this was just in a vacuum. Never been a fan of this matchup. It's a team that plays a lot like the Flyers do and does a lot of the same things they do. And I guess it goes both ways. It's probably difficult for them to deal with the way the Flyers play. But, yeah, this is and let's not forget this is a potential first-round playoff preview. So this is a big one tonight here to kind of see where everybody's at.
Yeah, the Canes are a team, if they can get a win tonight over the Flyers and New York doesn't get any points, they're then tied at 94 points. So the Canes may be pushing for that top spot, which would be a Flyer Ranger first round if the Flyers hold on to that third seed and the Rangers are the 2. So still a ton to play for. The Caps, by the way, did not get a win in their last game. And they're now 3 points back with a game in hand. And that's important.
That Austin Matthews guy had a hat trick. You believe that?
Yeah, I think we saw that back on, February 15th, I recall.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes
it looked just like that game.
It
looked just like that game. It was just another team playing them. It was stunning.
Yeah, and look, the Leafs obviously were on a back-to-back with the Flyers. They played the Flyers Tuesday and the Caps Wednesday. The Caps were not on a back-to-back and didn't come away with any points. But once again, tonight's just another big opportunity. You've got the Islanders right now through 68 games, so they have a game in hand on the Flyers, but they are 5 points back and have lost 5 straight. Flyers 5-4-1 in their last 10. And even though they're only 5-4-1 in their last 10, they've only missed out on 1 point to the Caps, who went 6-4 in their last 10.
Yeah. I should state for the record, I don't think Austin Matthews did have a hat trick because his hat trick goal got called back for an offsides challenge. So before the letters start coming, want to clear that up. But yeah, you're right. That's been the thing about this whole situation that the Flyers are in, is that they have had their dry stretches. There's no question about it. They had one back around the Stadium Series time. But every time that they have started to slow up a little bit, all the teams around them have as well. And so it's really been kind of interesting the way that whole thing has kind of shaken itself out. When you look at the standings in the East, you've got 5 teams that are really four teams, I guess, unless you want to count Toronto in this. But you got 4 teams that are up there in the upper tier, and then everybody else is kind of in a middle tier. You don't have a terrible team in the East like you do over in the West. You got a couple that are already eliminated from playoff contention, but the fact that there's those 4 teams up there that have been beating up on everybody has really made the next group down really tight. So it's and that has benefited the Flyers just from the start that they had against the teams out in the West.
I remember early in this season, maybe even to the midway point of the season, it was, what is Carolina this year, right? They're kind of really up and down, and they were a team having a hard time putting your finger on. They were giving up a decent amount of goals, and we're kind of going, what is going on? I remember doing the one pregame, and they gave up 7 goals in 2 of their first, 28 games. I was like, wow, this is bizarre. But where they are now, through 69 games, they have the 7th highest points percentage in the league. They score 3.39 goals per game, which, by the way, is 8th in the NHL. And when you look at what they give up, just 2.62 goals per game. They give up the 4th fewest goals. The power play is at 26.4%, which is 3rd in the league. And their PK is number 2 of the NHL. All their underlying and raw numbers, they're all good. They're a good team.
And don't forget they have a plus 51 goal differential, which is second best in the East, and it might be best in the East without those games that you mentioned there. The first part of the season. Since then, they've recovered to only be 8 goals behind Florida in that whole differential thing. So, certainly more of a team that I think is looking like last year's Carolina team. And, that team, people look at that team and they kind of, I think, discount them because they look at it and say, oh, they got swept in the playoffs. Well, that might have been the closest sweep in NHL history. So it's just, I think them kind of maybe coming back looking for a little bit of redemption, if you will, from the way last year went for them. And it's not just them either. I remember when we were in Boston on Saturday, I was talking to one of the writers there, and it's like, remember Boston was supposed to be terrible? Like, they weren't supposed to be doing anything this year, and here they are leading the East again. So it's it's one of those things where a couple of these squads, the Flyers being one of them, have certainly found themselves overachieving this year.
And the first before Christmas, they gave up 6 goals twice, 7 goals once, and 8 goals once. That is not Carolina hockey. Since then, I mean, you see their games: 5-1 they win, 3-1, 6-3, a bit of a shootout game with Chicago, but 1-0, 3-2. Tight hockey games. That's how this team is built to win. And they're a team right now that, when you look at, they've won now 7 of their last 8, and the one they lost was 1-0 against the New York Rangers.
Yeah. I mean, let's get this out of the way first before anybody loses perspective of the situation and blames anything that happens tonight on Sean Couturier not being in the lineup. This team is 8-2-0 in their last 10. They've won 4 in a row. They, again, are knocking on the door, as you said, for first place in the Metro. This is a very, very good team right now. We've talked about it. Sometimes it's about when you play a team, and maybe the Flyers will get lucky here and catch them on the end of a streak, but this is going to be a huge test tonight. And it was going to be a huge test regardless of the circumstances the Flyers came in here with.
Yeah, and look, they did play Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday all on the road. This is their first game back home.
Yeah,
so
sometimes that's helpful.
Yeah, no question about it. They won those games 5-4 in the shootout over Toronto, 7-2 over Ottawa, and 4-1 over the New York Islanders. Tonight it's Flyers Canes. Let's take our last time out here on Flyers Game Day. We'll take a look at the line combinations and more coming up right after this on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network.
Sometimes you know my sense when we met this time and was on the side stories. So it's great to be together again.
So much fun, so much fun. I love that. And also fun fact that playoff goal assisted by our respected Bob and Evan Kuznetsov was the first all-Russian goal in franchise history. Amazing. Well, after that, the Kings headed to Long Island to take on the New York Islanders. They closed out the road trip. They met to division win against Islanders on Tuesday. Seth Jarvis notched 2 goals to get the game started. That combined against Ottawa and Jarvis combining their footing. With the Canes' big road trip and the Rangers losing to the Winnipeg Jets on Tuesday, the Canes sit just 2 points behind the Rangers in the Metro standings. Rounding out third, 14 points behind the Canes are the Philadelphia Flyers, who we face tonight in a Metro matchup. This will be the 4th and final meeting between the teams this season. The Canes leading the series 2-1, and as you saw, the Flyers still gain a playoff spot, but they've gone 4-1 since the start of March. The Flyers right now are still in the final net, averaging 2.56 goals per game this month, and their power play ranks last in NHL. But their penalty kill ranks 3rd in NHL. The Canes need to play extra smart on the man advantage. Also, important to note for tonight's game, Coach Robert were announcing that we will be going 11-7 tonight to D'Angelo.
We are back live as the Philadelphia Flyers get set to take on the Carolina Hurricanes. A couple of players before we get to the line combination, Smitty, that we're keeping an eye on tonight. One up front and one on the blue line. And up front, we're looking at Morgan Frost in his last 10 games, 10 points, 3 goals, 7 assists. He's a +3, playing just under 15 minutes of ice time. And he looks like a player right now that's just swelling with confidence and therefore creativity in a very skilled game.
Yeah, that's a huge part of what he does, isn't it? And it's one of those things that really only shows itself when he is playing with that confidence. You can't just go out there night after night and pull that kind of that part of your game off. You've got to be kind of in a groove, kind of feeling it. And that's not going to happen every night for Morgan Frost. But, the Flyers are just trying to get him to a point where he's doing it more often than he's not doing it. The whole consistency moniker is going to be a little different with a player like him than it is with a player like, say, Noah Cates or something like that. But, he's providing exactly what this team needs right now, because there's no question that, some of their scoring prior to the last game had kind of dried up. So their hope is that they can keep the same guys going that started to get going against Toronto, that this power play keeps going a little bit. It's looked very, very good in the last 3 games or so, and he's been a big part of that.
No doubt about it. We have a guy that the power play is running through in that bumper position. If you go back to February 15th, that game against Toronto, the Flyers lost in overtime. That was a game where Cam York got banged up. I think he had a shoulder injury, went into the Stadium Series, and he was a -3 in that game. He wasn't right for a couple of games, but in the 11 games since, beginning on the 25th of February, that Pittsburgh game, 11 games, 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points +1, and playing over 24 minutes a game. He's the guy we're looking at on that back end. He and Travis Sanheim are going to carry a ton of ice time.
Yeah, we're kind of going to be watching him the rest of the season, are we not? Just to see where he goes in terms of what Torts has said about what he's going to do with him the rest of the year. That he's going to be playing a ton of minutes, and it's just out of necessity, really, because the Flyers again banged up still on the blue line. We've seen we've seen a couple of guys surface in skates before practice, maybe. You can get a couple of guys back here before the year's out, but the fact that they've got their third pair playing on their second pair, and then a couple of AHL call-ups playing in that third pair. Although Addard and Jennings are not just kind of worn down veterans, they're prospects, and I think they've looked pretty good together. But that doesn't change the fact that a lot of this minutes are going to fall on Cam York and Travis Sanheim, and York especially, because Sandy's still a little bit banged up. He's not 100%, I don't think. So,
day today.
So it's it's going to be a great opportunity for him to kind of grab the ball and run with it here.
Yep. Here's the line combinations: Paling, Forster, and Hathaway, Frost, Tippett, and Konechny, Lawton with Farabee and Brink, Cates, Centers, Delarier, and Lixell. York and Sanheim together once again, no shock there. Yinning and Addard on that second pair, and Yegor Zamula and Eric Johnson on the third. And it is Sam Ersson getting the start and goal for the second straight game. I like this game a lot against Toronto, and Sam wants to develop some consistency and confidence, the 2 C's at the same time, to get you 2 points in the standings. And he's going to be leaned on in this game tonight, because this is a team with the additions of Gensel and Kuznetsov that'll come at the Flyers for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's, when you look at the way the Flyers goaltending went over that span of games right after the trade deadline, I think they both took a little bit of a hit just in terms of maybe overall confidence, overall sharpness. But, at the same time, nobody ever did well in the playoffs by being sharp in February. You don't want to peak at the wrong time. And I do think that there was a little bit of getting used to for both the goaltenders to some of the new personnel and the new pairings on defense. And I think Sammy's bounced back extremely well from those tough games where he ended up leaving early. And that game against Toronto hopefully was just what he needed to get back his edge.
Yeah, and that's a team that when you're able to get a win over them and a good result, that you can really build some confidence on. Flyers have been really good in these situations, probably last thing, of playing top teams in the NHL on the road this season. If there's one really area that a stressful situation that they've been good at, it's this.
Yeah, for whatever reason, going on the road, usually going on the road is not as successful, and usually playing good teams on the road is not as successful. They've excelled at both this year, and that's been a big part of where they're at. So this is another time that would be great to continue that.
Absolutely agree. Stay tuned, though. We've got Tim Saunders and Todd Fedor. They've got the countdown to face off as the Flyers get set to face off against the Carolina Hurricanes. You've been listening to Flyers Game Day on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network.